All righty. So I've got a little PowerPoint kind of dealio that I put together for you. And we'll start there. And I like to be interrupted. So if you think of things, jump in. I prefer the interactive nature of presentations. So feel free to cut me off, jump in, ask a question. It's much more fun that way. You know what? I'm going to have Linda, can I also make you a host so that you can keep an eye on the waiting room? Or are you on your tablet, aren't you? That's not fun to do.
I'm on my tablet.
Okay. Congratulations,
Sorry.
Kathy Williamson. You just got appointed co-host. Yay.
Okay, I don't know anything about the waiting room.
I entrust you. If you'll see a little pop up and then you just let them in.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
keep an eye on it too, but I don't want to leave anybody behind.
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about affirming ministries in Community of Christ. And we're just going to get kind of like an overview. We'll talk about some high points and kind of just get our bearings on, what does that mean in 2024 in the Michigan Mission Center. We'll look at some of the congregations who have been through the program already. And we'll hear a little bit from Kathy, whose congregation, Riverview, went through the program recently as well. And then, like I said, we'll have lots of time for questions. All right, I can get my presentation to go. There we go. All right, so, and I think that's actually, there we go. So has anybody heard of the organization Harmony, other than from maybe I sent you an email and said, come to this Harmony presentation? Have you guys heard of Harmony, or hopefully that name's kind of floating around, starting to feel familiar? Good. Harmony is an organization that actually came from the merger of two other organizations. And one in particular you might have heard of is GALA, Gay and Lesbian Acceptance. And GALA has been around since like the mid 80s. Does GALA kind of sound familiar to some folks? Maybe. GALA has a really strong history of support in the Michigan Mission Center. Lots of early GALA folks were Michiganders, and also our Mission Center has a history of being really supportive there. So proud to partner with Harmony. Harmony was formed in 2019 when GALA merged with another organization that was doing kind of this part of the work, that was doing the sort of the welcoming and affirming side of it. And that was called the Welcoming Communities Network. So those two organizations merged and then did a rebrand and are now called Harmony. So Harmony is a nonprofit that is specifically works with Community of Christ and is really rooted in Community of Christ identity. Harmony exists to try and create an environment of full participation for the queer community and Community of Christ. There are some areas of the world where we have a lot more work to do. There are some areas of the world where we're doing very well and making good progress. But Harmony has this kind of canned program that's really focused on Community of Christ specifics. Before this new program, which has been out just a couple of years, we were using an ecumenical tool that was from a whole bunch of organizations, Harmony being one of them, had worked on a tool for lots of different denominations to work with. And that worked for us for a long time. But now with COVID and everything being on Zoom, it kind of opened up a new opportunity to be able to do this a little bit more easily. And so we've got a cool new program, new within like the last year and a half or so, that's much more focused on like Community of Christ theology, Community of Christ history, and our specific understanding of Scripture. Any questions about that part so far? Anybody from the lecture hall? You guys are one of the, how you can only see like 4 little pictures. I can see all of you. So yay. All right. So here's we'll go into a pop quiz. Let's see here. Does anybody know? You can't have already gone through the program. That's cheating. Does anybody know in what year did Community of Christ in the US approve same-sex marriage and ordination of folks in same-sex relationships? Anybody know? You can just shout it out. We had a national conference that year. So I guess you could look back and do World Conference, National Conference math.
2013.
Oh, I heard a 2016. I heard a 2013. Any other guesses? Anybody want to? 2013. 2013 is the year that we had that national conference and approved what ended up being a series of like 4 or 5 policies. The policy itself didn't come out until 2014. So we voted on it in 2013, but it wasn't really in practice until 2014. And we had that same policy in Community of Christ up until I think 2021 was when the newest policy came out. And it says essentially the same things, but in better, more modern language in our new policy. And really the nuts and bolts of that policy is that same-sex marriage is allowed in Community of Christ. The original policy was written before the Supreme Court ruling. And so we used to have a lot of different options in there based on what was legal state to state. Now that we have that acceptance federally, same-sex marriage is essentially completely the same as a heterosexual marriage. One of the good things that came out of that policy was some more modern wording that we can use now in our marriage ceremonies and some other good stuff, but essentially they are exactly the same. And same for ordination. The process for folks who are in same-sex relationships is identical to folks who are in heterosexual relationships. So no special caveats or anything. Peggy's here. No special caveats or anything like that. Essentially identical policies, even though we have sort of a standalone one that talks about what LGBTQ inclusion looks like, it's not different than it would be for heterosexual folks. Does that make sense? Or questions about that? I find that even though this is like a 10-year-old policy, a lot of times that stuff doesn't trickle down into congregations. And so people just don't really know what the, IHQ or World Church policy is on that. Okay, not seeing any questions. All right. This one, it's a trick question, I guess, because it's a little bit about why we're here. But does anybody maybe want to start off kind of a conversation or a little bit of a working definition here? What is the difference between being welcoming and affirming? A lot of times when congregations start, I'll hear them say, well, we're already welcoming. We welcome everybody. And so you have to dig into that nuance a little bit. What do you think is the difference between being welcoming and affirming?
Well, I know, like you just said, everybody can welcome anyone. And it's not until you accept them, you can be affirming. And I think that's the difference, because you can let anyone walk in your door and welcome them, but not always necessarily accept them or even show them affirmation that thank you for being here, beyond words. And it's how you feel. And I think that to me is the affirming part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. People are not just welcomed, but they're included, right? There's not some like secondary, way of being in the congregation. You still get invited out to lunch. They still want you to bring potatoes to the potluck. You still could be ordained, right? It's not a separate type of inclusion. It's not a, well, we're glad you're here, but we're kind of praying at home that maybe you'll become straight or, see the error of your ways. Inclusion really is accepting and really opening yourself up to be blessed by the gifts that different people bring, opening yourself to that diversity. I love that, John. That's great. Other thoughts on that? Go ahead.
I was going to say this, that I thought becoming a welcoming and affirming congregation, you go through some sort of a process, and then there's some sort of official either signature or something on our sign that lets people know that. That's what I thought it meant.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. You're totally right. This is the program that we're talking about, and we'll get into like some more of the details in a minute, is that way. It's a specific program by Harmony, and you get a little sort of stamp of approval from Harmony that you are a welcoming and affirming congregation. And so that's a way to signify to LGBTQ folks who might be looking to join your congregation. They're from the Northview area. They're going to go on Facebook and see, oh, look at this. They have a welcoming statement. Looks like they've done some work with this organization. People will be able to see that you're not just welcoming them in that you're opening your doors, but that you're creating a hospitable place. And they can trust that a little bit more because you've worked with an organization, because you've done some background work, right? Most LGBTQ people will not assume that when you say all are welcome, they are included in the all, because their experience has been when we go to congregations, there's harm that happens, and a lot of it is accidental, right? But we do create harm when we're not well enough educated. And so doing some background work is really, really important, and it helps prevent these little accidental harms that are kind of the difference between being just welcoming versus being really including and affirming. So yeah, you're right on with that. And I'll show you before we go where you can look. There's 2 places you can look and see which congregations have gone through this process. So you can see where, hopefully, where your congregation will be listed someday. Other thoughts on this, the difference between being welcoming and affirming?
Linda, can I say that, you know, the like you say, Harmony approving your congregation as welcoming and affirming, or getting a plaque or being signed on the bottom line, that's really just a byproduct of going through the process. That doesn't make you an affirming congregation. You do the work and you just determine that, yes, we are accepting of every person who walks through the door, no matter who they are, who they love, what they look like. We are just accepting them into every aspect of it. The program helps you get to that point, but just being in the program does not make you an affirming congregation.
That's true, Kathy. Thank you for that. It's one of those things where you get out of it what you put into it, right? Your congregation can choose to really be transformed by the experience, to, kind of be pushed into mission, or you could just walk through it and decide not to really engage with it. That unfortunately happens from time to time. Thanks for that, Kathy. Other thoughts on that? All right. Another question that comes up from time to time is, I'm looking through here because I'm thinking, I wish there was someone here from Mount Pleasant or from Waterford, because they're such a good example of this. But sometimes we'll have a person or two, and this kind of goes along with the we're already welcoming thing. Why do we have to do this about, the LGBTQ community? What about people with disabilities? What about the homeless? There's so many things we should be doing. Why do we have to focus on this? And I think that's a really fair question. We have limited time in our congregations, and we all have busy lives at church and at home. And I think there's a lot of reasons that we can do that. But this is probably the most practical. This is a program that's already written that will teach you how to engage in advocacy and understanding with a group that you might be undereducated about. And once you've been through the program and you get some skills, keep going. This isn't the only program that you should do. You should still do programs for folks with disabilities, and you should still do programs for understanding people who are unhoused. This isn't really about, specifically highlighting just one group. It's definitely about shining a light on an area that has been harmed by Christianity, significantly harmed by Christianity. I think this is important work that we have to do. But don't let this be the end of the way that you educate yourselves. Let this be a really good opening, and then see where your congregation is pulled and keep going with that. I don't know, Kathy, do you want to add anything to that? Because we did have a little bit of discussion with your congregation on this as well.
We had a lot of discussion before we started the program on not just this question, but the one before it. And I think it's just normal to feel that way. But we had a lot of discussion between the pastoral team. We have a team of 3 pastors. Before we even talked to the congregation about starting the program, we're already welcoming, and we welcome everybody. And why do we need to just welcome LGBTQ people? What about, like you said, homeless people or whatever, different cultures? I think it's just normal. You have to kind of go through that thought process to get where you need to be.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. Questions or comments on that?
I think Sorry.
Yeah, this is Gary Gordier from Midland, Michigan. We
Hey,
attend.
Gary.
City. Hi. I've been through the process with another congregation in another state, Fort Collins, Colorado. And, the question always is there, but I think what going through the process opens the doors for you to understand how you can be more affirming and welcoming to all these other marginalized groups. And you have the tool set to begin moving in that direction, however the congregation, and over time, I'm sure that each congregation may shift focus and emphasis, and this is a tool set that can be used across the board.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for that, Gary. And so many of these injustices are like intertwined, right? It's not really just one string, it's a big knot. And when you start pulling at one piece of injustice, you're going to notice you're pulling at these other pieces too. So even though we're going to be focused on LGBTQ topics, we're also going to have to touch on racism, and we're going to also have to touch on classism, because these are all pieces that fit together as part of injustice. So we're focused on something, but we're trying to understand how all these parts of injustice work together. Linda, it sounded like you had something to add too.
I did, and it's something similar to what you just said. But hearing, the people say, well, why do we have to focus on this? Don't, sometimes it's, well, they got the right to get married, so we're done with that now, right? No, first off. And second, it's a similar argument that I hear with people. It's like when they say things like Black Lives Matter, and then people are like, well, all lives matter. Well, yes, but we're focusing on Black lives because traditionally they have mattered less.
Sure.
And for this, it's like, yes, we're focusing on LGBTQ folks because traditionally they have not been as welcome as you think they have been.
Right.
So we're redressing some injustice, as you say, and that all those injustices, you focus on one, and it's kind of like if you give a mouse a cookie kind of situation. If you focus on one injustice, you will open your eyes and see so many more.
Thanks, Linda. Other thoughts or reflections on this one? All right. So I wanted to go through and kind of look at what congregations in Michigan have already done this. This has been a big focus for us starting last year in January of 2023, something that I've been spending a lot of time on. I've got one more person coming in. So this is something I've been spending quite a bit of time on over the last year and a half or so. So when we started in January of 2023, we had just 3 congregations that had gone through this. That was Big Rapids, East Lansing, and Spiral. Many of you might be familiar with Spiral Congregation. They're located in what was the Lapeer Congregation building, and it was the Otter Lake Congregation has moved into the Lapeer Congregation building. And they've had really great success doing tons of awesome LGBTQ ministry there. But those were the 3 congregations that had gone through it up to that point. So you can see we've been working really hard. We're up to 8 congregations in Michigan that have gone through this program. Right now in the program is the Blue Water Congregation and also Richmond. And I have one congregation for sure that's nailed down to start in the fall, and I can take one more, maybe 2 if you sweet talked me. Maybe I could take another one on top of that if I felt generous. But I like to try to do just 2 or 3 at a time, because otherwise it gets real confusing for me of who's doing what thing. But it is a big goal for us. I'm really proud of this, and I share this a lot, that Michigan is a big mission center. We have 63 congregations and 1 emerging congregation. So we are probably the biggest mission center congregation number wise outside of maybe Africa. So while we have the most, well, it seems like we have a lot, we also have the most congregations, but I still like to brag on us because we have way more welcoming and affirming congregations that have gone through this process specifically with Harmony than any of the other mission centers. So I think we should be proud of that. We've always been kind of a powerhouse mission center, and I really like to see us leading the way through the church. I think it's really cool. So this is an important goal for me. If the 2 finish, They will, before summer, that are going to finish before summer gets too far. And we finish up 2 more in the fall, like I think we will. We should be at 12 congregations in Michigan before the end of the year, which is amazing. I think we should all give ourselves a big round of applause on that. But there are a lot of congregations that I know already are welcoming and affirming, or they're really, really close, and could be added to this list with just a little bit of work and some time. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to be able to invite people in. It's definitely an area where some work is needed. Any questions about this map or specifically the congregations that have gone through it? All right, and I'll show you where you can find that map later too. So let's talk about what's actually in the program. Sort of what's the actual meat here. You're going to meet 10 times. There are 9 modules, but one of them is, Kathy, are you giggling because it says 90 minutes?
Yeah,
I saw that.
exactly.
You're going to meet 10 times. One of the modules, we're going to break apart that really long acronym LGBTQIA2S+. And that's a lot of information for most people who haven't had an opportunity to be exposed to that topic in that much detail. So we break that up over 2 modules. We're going to meet regularly. For most congregations, that's twice a month, and we'll shoot for every other week. Sometimes we have to deviate from that a little bit if there's a lot of holidays in there or something, but we want to meet twice a month. I have found that if we go too far between the sessions, we just don't really get that kind of momentum and excitement that we want to try to create around this topic. I have had a couple of congregations go every week. If most people in your congregation are already there, and you can convince me, we could go week to week and be done much sooner. Each time we meet, it's going to be for 90 minutes. Depending on the personality of your congregation. So when I was with Riverview, we were there like 2 hours every single time because we were all having so much fun and having such good discussion. There are some modules where we might be out of there in like 75 minutes and finish up early. Kind of depends on the topic that we're covering and what your congregation's interest is and needs are. So for example, when we get to the module on scriptural interpretation, that might be a longer module if you have a lot of folks with questions on that topic. We might slow down and spend some more time there. But the time sort of just depends on the personality of the church and how much chit-chatting you guys like to do. It's very interactive and has a lot of discussion in it. So there's a lot of opportunity for everyone to share. I put individual work, and I used to call this homework, but I found that some people were getting like, I don't know, elementary school or middle school flashbacks or something, and they didn't want to do homework. So it's not graded, it's individual work. So this will be things like listening to a podcast in between, maybe reading a short article. There's one week where you'll watch a free movie on YouTube. Just some things like that to kind of expand our understanding of the topics that we're working on, maybe make some connections between modules. And particularly for, say, the scriptural interpretation module, we're going to listen to a podcast with Tony and Charmaine Chavala-Smith so that they can give us some background. And then when we come together, we're ready for a more rich discussion. So there's not a ton of individual work. It won't take you a lot of time, but there will be some assignments in between. Each module has some devotional aspects. We use some of the Beyond the Walls hymns, which are wonderful and what a gift to the church. We've got some prayer readings, some poems that we go through, but we try to add sort of a spiritual element to each session because this is head and heart work. A lot of it is about learning information we haven't had the opportunity to be exposed to, but we're also trying to engage our hearts and our spiritual selves as well. So we include a devotional aspect there. And then the most important part, I think, is that every single time we meet, we do a check-in. So I just use a stoplight system, red, yellow, green. Where are you at with this program just today, right? So we're not evaluating the whole program each week, just where are you today in the program? And we all vote openly together so that everyone can see where each other are at. And that might feel a little bit weird or vulnerable at first, but I think it's important for us to be honest and open about where we are on the subjects that we're covering. And there's no shame at being anywhere, red, yellow, or green. Just lets us know when we found a spot that we need to slow down, or maybe we have some more questions, or need more information. So, for example, if we found 2 times in a row, most people were at yellow, we probably have found a spot where we need to do some more digging and find out where we've lost people, where maybe I need to provide some more information, something like that. Does that make sense, or questions about that? Or Kathy, feel free to add anything that I might have missed that's at the top of your mind too.
One thing about the red, yellow, green is in a group situation, there are some people who are just followers. And so you have to kind of be aware of that. At one point, as we were going through, I felt that there was one member who was saying yellow or green, I can't remember, but I really, from other conversations, felt that that was not accurate. And so we stopped and we kind of discussed a little bit more. So you just have that flexibility. It's really good to know you don't have to rush through. You don't have to take all of Linda's time like we did, but you don't have to rush through. If you feel like, wait, we need to talk about more, then you should do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of opportunities for us to slow down and take the time we need. You can take lots of my time as long as you feed me every time I'm there, like Riverview.
Which we did.
And you can take 2 hours every time. Then we'll allow it. You can get me almost anywhere with donuts. Any questions on that, kind of the practical stuff? I'm going to show you on the next slide what topics we cover, but any logistical type questions? Okay.
I have a question. Is this all in person then?
Good question, Danny. We can do it either way. I've done, sometimes it just depends how far you are really. For you guys all the way over there on the west side of the state, it probably would be on Zoom most of the times. I have some congregations where I've gone through and it's been almost all Zoom, and I might come in person for like a specific module. Like when we start the LGBTQ module and we're really looking at that long acronym, sometimes that one's easier to do in person. There's a lot of flexibility. It pretty much just depends on what my drive time is like. Good question. Other questions on that? Okay. Flip back over. So here's what we cover in the session. So this is sort of the heading for each of the 9 modules. And I see some people are taking notes in the lecture hall. So take any notes that you want, but I'll also put this on YouTube. I'll also put this on YouTube if you want to look at it later. So don't feel like too pressured to write it all down. So we're going to work on conflict resolution skills. Hopefully, we're going to have some hard conversations when we're together, and we're going to challenge each other, and we're going to grow together and learn from each other's experiences. So we want to learn how to have those conversations in a way that's actually productive and that moves us forward. How we can disagree and still love each other, which is something Community of Christ is pretty good at, but we got to keep practicing that skill. We'll talk about power and privilege, you know, in our culture and society and how that impacts LGBTQ folks, but also how power and privilege works in our congregations, in our mission center, in the church, and how that might be impacting LGBTQ folks in community with us as well. We get those 2 things right out of the way kind of early on. We talk about power and privilege early on. Before we get into really the LGBTQ heavy topics, because it's important for us to have those background skills before we start talking about things that are going to challenge us a little more. The next 2 meetings are breaking down this acronym LGBTQIA2S+. We're going to talk about what each of those letters mean and what groups of people those letters are trying to describe. Most people will learn a lot in this session. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's one of those there's no dumb questions type sections. It's really, really fruitful, and we're going to learn a lot of empathy and understanding around sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. You might not be able to do the whole LGBTQIA2S+ acronym from memory by the end, but you will leave feeling like you understand what types of folks we're talking about and what their life experiences are like. Should I add anything at that point, Kathy, from those like first 3-4 modules?
You know, that power and privilege one was difficult for us. But it was very important. So don't feel like, why are we talking about this? Because it really does help you to understand where people who have been specifically have been hurt by the church because of their LGBTQ status, I guess. That helps you understand what they've been going through, even though I think we talk more about social status or economic status. All of that is just important to understanding. We did have, matter of fact, I think we still have a person who just said, I don't get that. I never experienced any of that. And it occurs to me that maybe he was on the receiving end, and that's why, couldn't buy into that or couldn't understand that. But it is important to take the time to go through that. And no, you won't remember all of the acronyms, trust me. I'm sitting here looking at it saying, oh, no, what was the I again?
But when we were really in it, you were crushing it. I remember you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The next module then is LGBTQ history in Community of Christ. So it's a little bit of the how did we get here and where exactly is here. So we'll talk a little bit about what mission centers or countries have had a national conference policy like we have. We'll talk a bit about some of the policies that came out beforehand, some of the changes, and hopefully the where we're going next a little bit. What is that one? Next one. See, I have to move your little bubble here. Current Community of Christ policy. Now that's in that same module too. Module 6 is scriptural interpretation. Again, this is another great module. I find that it depends very much on congregation to congregation, just whether this is kind of a contentious one or not. But we'll talk about sort of the how we differ from other Christians on our understanding of scripture and how that's part of the way that we are affirming of LGBTQ folks. So in the scriptural interpretation module, we're going to do a podcast beforehand to give us a little bit of background knowledge. And I've got lots of videos that we can use depending on where your congregation is. We'll kind of personalize this one based on what you need. And we'll talk about what we call the clobber passages. So that's that little group of, I think it's 9 scriptures that are kind of, handpicked out of the Bible to sort of, prove that homosexuality is wrong. We'll go through some of those and talk about sort of our view and understanding of that from a Community of Christ perspective. That's a really fun, interesting mod. Maybe fun's not the right word. Maybe it's fun if you're a theologically minded. Maybe otherwise it's just interesting. I think that module is fun. Module 7 is scenarios. And I promise I won't make you like act anything out. I won't make you dress up like a shepherd. They're not like miserable, performance scenarios, because I'm the type of person that dreaded that stuff like at VBS. But we're going to have an opportunity to like introduce ourselves using our pronouns. We'll have an opportunity to work through some situations. What if there's kind of a kerfuffle in the lobby because someone in the congregation is new and not accepting? Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We have a trans person in our building and they need to use the restroom. What's our plan? We'll walk through some of those to just kind of get out some of the nerves that we might have around welcoming new people. We never want it to be like the first time we've introduced ourselves with our pronouns is the first time that someone new comes in our building, right? So we'll practice some of those real basic skills together so that we feel good about that. And then the last couple of times that we meet, we're going to be working on our welcoming statements. And if we have time, we're doing okay right now. If we have time, I'll show you some of those welcoming statements that have come from congregations recently, because this is a really key part. When your congregation finishes these modules, we're going to write a welcoming statement that is specific for the LGBTQ plus community. It's going to be just a few sentences, but this statement is what your congregation will vote on at your business meeting to adopt. So if the congregation votes, at least 75% of the congregation votes to adopt your welcoming statement, that's sort of your pass, and then you can be added to our growing list of welcoming and affirming congregations. So the welcoming statement is kind of the part that everything, hinges on. It looks a little bit different congregation to congregation because, as I've said a couple of times, every congregation has their own personality. And it's
Mm.
really important for that welcome to feel authentic to your community. So your congregation will write your own, and I will help you a lot. It's not as like intimidating or overwhelming as it might sound. I will help you a lot, and you're allowed to plagiarize. So we'll look at some other good statements, and we can just steal from other congregations as much as we want.
That's
Kathy?
not called plagiarizing. That's called harvesting.
I like that. I like that.
We are harvesting from others.
Yes, it's a sharing community. Is there anything I missed from those, or that's like really important from your view as a pastor, Kathy?
I don't, we are still really excited about our welcoming statement. That's really the biggest thing from there. I would like to revisit that scriptural interpretation one, because it's maybe, I am not able to quote scripture like many people can, or some people can, especially people who may have a differing point of view than we do. And so that one is pretty important, and it would be great to do that again. Maybe I'll join one of the other groups when you get to that module.
Oh, sure.
But pay attention when you do that one, pay attention as much as you can. It really is helpful.
And that reminds me that you asked me for something that I didn't send you.
Yes, I did. I was thinking the same thing.
And I will send that to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me pull up. I have a little Google Doc here, and we have a little bit of time. So let me show you maybe some of our welcoming statements. And I hope this will be encouraging. So ignore that Church of Christ one, because that's not. We'll start with Riverview. We are a welcoming community centered on the worth of all persons. Responding to God's call, we affirm and include LGBTQIA2S+ persons at every level of our congregation. We recognize each person as whole, sacred, and unconditionally loved by God. You are welcome here, and we are blessed by your presence. How about an amen on that? I think that's really beautiful. Really, really nicely done. Here's one from my congregation, Beyond the Horizon. We affirm that 2S LGBTQIA+ persons are beloved by God, and we welcome all people as whole and sacred. We affirm the worth of all persons and believe that each person enriches our fellowship and community in unique and meaningful ways. We invite people of all gender identities, gender expressions, and sexual orientations to fully participate in our community. All are welcome. You are welcome. So I have there's some really, really great ones. I have a good kind of collection here going, but I can't give it all to you because that's part of the surprise. That's just your taste. You have to enroll in the program if you want to see the rest of them. But we'll go through some really good welcoming statements like those that have been written recently. And then we'll just kind of take notes. We'll find pieces that you like. We can rephrase them in words that feel more like your congregation and try to kind of create a message together that we would want to share with our community and to intentionally welcome LGBTQ folks to worship with us. Does that part make sense, or any questions on that piece? All right, let me make sure that was my last slide. Okay, it was. That was the last thing that I really, really wanted to get to on purpose today. So I think now I'm going to invite Kathy, and I've, asked her to just kind of share her commentary as we've gone, but I want to invite Kathy to just share for however long, for no more than 18 minutes, your testimony.
I haven't prepared a sermon.
Your testimony of your congregation's experience with the program. And, I think too, sometimes the question is like, we've talked about the logistics, right? What we're going to actually do, how long it's going to take, but like, how was it for the congregation as far as your relationships? There's a fear sometimes that people will leave or it'll be a lot of disruption. And I don't want to project fears, but before we stop recording, maybe you could talk about that. And then we'll pause and we can ask maybe even more personal questions if you want as well. But if you wouldn't mind, just kind of share freely.
I wanted to include some of that anyway. But I want to say that before we even decided to to ask Linda to take us through this process. The pastors met multiple times. We did a lot of discussion, a lot of prayer. I plagiarized some other questionnaire from the program that I changed, and I sent it out to the whole congregation, let everybody answer questions to get a feel for how the congregation was feeling and whether there was even a desire to move forward. And it was such a wonderful response. Most of the people were ready to go ahead and move forward. There were some who had questions, and there were a couple that were just absolutely not, we're not doing this. So you just can't let that stop you if the majority of your congregation is ready to do this. We had concerns about certain people that were already very vocal about this and how it might be disruptive to our congregation. And to be honest with you, we are still facing those concerns from the very people that we were worried about. When we decided to go through the program, we did in fact lose a couple people from the congregation, but they have come back. They haven't changed their mind, but they come and they worship with us. And they're still part of our congregation. They're still accepted to be there themselves. We do have one who's very outspoken about it. And he, of course, is the one who knows all of the scriptures to quote and has all of the arguments. So that is still a point of pain for us, I want to say. But the flip side of that is we have had a couple other people who had stopped coming and have come back to the church because we have gone through this program and we're welcoming and affirming. Not that they are part of that community, but because we have taken that step to say that we accept everybody. And so that has really, really been a blessing for us. Riverview, we're talkers and we're eaters. So our sessions were a lot longer. We always had a potluck every time that we met. You don't have to do that, but for us, that's how we meet together. And so it was helpful for us, and it kind of gets people to open up. Even people who were afraid to say something, we tried to make it so that everyone was comfortable whatever it was on their mind, even if they disagreed with what other people were saying. So I think that went really well for our process. I guess what I want to end with is that we're excited that not this weekend, but next weekend, we are going to be at the first ever Downriver Pride Festival. And we'll have a booth there. And we're just so excited about that. That's the materials that Linda was talking about sending me are for that event. We did several things. I'm still nervous about it because I'm having some mobility issues. I just had surgery. So I'm worried about getting in and out. But other people are going to, are going to be there too. So it's going to be wonderful. The welcoming and affirming statement that Linda read to you, we have had a banner made with that, and that's going to hang on our tent for the event. And we have a bunch of freebies, and we're giving away baskets, and it's just a wonderful thing. We're very excited to be able to show our faces in the community like that. I want to tell you, we have not had one single LGBTQ person from the community step into our church yet, but we have some one or two other members that we're aware of, that we're more aware of now because we've gone through the program. So we're hopeful that with this festival, we'll be able to bring some people in, because for me, the point has always been that everyone should have a safe place to worship and to learn about God and to know how unconditionally they are loved. And so that's my hope for the program at our congregation and in our little area. And I hope that that works for you too.
I really appreciate that, Kathy, and I appreciate your honesty on that. And one thing that I just was thinking about while I was listening to you talk is that sometimes people will have concerns about like their building being vandalized or something like that after they've gone through the process and kind of been more public about that. I think I remember that was a concern at the congregation. And can you clarify that you haven't had any issues with that so far?
We have not had any issues. We had a couple things. Linda gave us a flag. When you're done, you get a bunch of freebies. And Linda gave us a large flag, which we hang on the front of our building, or kind of by the front entrance of our building. And a couple times I'll pull in and the flag's been gone. It's like, oh no, somebody stole the flag. No, the wind tore it down and we had to fix it. Then this last week we had more wind and I pulled into church. I was like, it's not there again. The wind tore it down and it was laying on the ground. Nobody has called us. Nobody has done anything to the building. We've not had any backlash whatsoever. Also contacted the police department because of those concerns and wanted to see if they would come in and maybe do a threat assessment kind of a thing for us. And the officer did not follow up, even though I talked to him several times. But again, we haven't had any issues. I'm wondering whether that might change after the festival, but I really don't think so. I think it's okay, and that if something happens, we have the tools to be able to deal with that. No guns in our church.
Good. Yeah, our insurance does not allow that.
No.
To be clear. Thanks for that, Kathy. I'm gonna push pause, I think, on our recording here, and then we'll switch over to just like an open Q&A time. So if you're watching this later on YouTube, goodbye.